Hello everyone, welcome back to Make the Music, and today I'll be going over how to recreate the sound from Avenged Sevenfold's album Hail to the King. We're looking at the track Doin' Time. This was a really interesting one, a great album, very impactful album when it came out, and a lot of great tracks on it. Very big sounding, probably one of the best produced and best sounding Avenged Sevenfold albums in their discography, in my opinion. So you heard that playthrough. Let's get into the track here and let's break it down. What we got going on here? We have Superior Drummer 3 for the drum sound. I'm going to solo that real quick. This is one of the more bigger sounding Avenged Sevenfold drum kits. I think some samples were actually used on this album for that. Not typical of the band for them to do that, but I think it sounds great. Let's look at the Superior Drummer 3 patch real quick here. So I'm actually using the hard rock kit for this one. It felt like it fit the aesthetic a little better as opposed to maybe a more top end heavy metal kit or something like that. So if we look at the kick drum here, I am using the Big Crack kit from the Metal EZX, and I just turned down the level a little bit. There's some mixing on it as well. And then for the snare, there's a lot going on with the snare. So we've got 5 stacks on the snare. The first one is just one of the hard rock snares, the Done It Maple prototype. That's a good sounding one. It's about balancing the volumes of these to get the correct amount of attack and sustain, and it was quite the balancing act here. This snare is the Done It Titanium, and this is just basically the attack of that one. This is the Big Crack snare from the Metal kit. This is the Ludwig Supraphonic from the Metal Machine. That's adding a lot to the sound as well. And then we've got the Tama Bell Brass from the Hard Rock kit with the envelope really closed off. So we're just getting the attack of that one. So that's the snare sound. Sounds pretty good to me. The rest is just stock kit elements from the Hard Rock kit and Hat 1. So that's the basics of that kit there. I don't have any processing going on here. It's just all the standard outs, and it's heading into these different channels in Reaper here. So for the drums, let's look at the drum bus. I'm using a couple different things. First off, I'm using Virtual Mix Rack, Virtual Channel, EQ, adding a bit of top, and the black channel for compression. A little more compression than I typically use on the drum bus. The mix is not at 100%, but definitely a more compressed drum sound than we would typically get on an A7X album. And then here, I'm using the CLA Epic to add some ambiance to the drums. I didn't want to go over the top with this. It's not like an 80s crazy reverb drum sound, but it does have some ambience to it, and it helped add to the bigness of the drum sound there. Now, if we look at the kick, I'm using some EQ, added some beef in the low end, scooping out some of this mid-range here, and then adding quite a bit of top. See, it just was too squishy, did not have enough cut when I didn't have the EQ on, and then adding more top here, and a little more low end at like 152, and then just cutting it off slightly, and that seemed to get the kick drum all the way there. Sounds pretty close to the album, in my opinion. Now let's get to the snare. The snare, I've got quite a bit of processing on. This took a little while to dial in. So scooping out low mids, high pass, adding in quite a bit of a top for attack, more EQ, scooping out more low mids, adding some more mid-range there. And then Virtual Mix Rack coming in, Virtual Channel, more top end, just kept needing it. So like if I took the processing off, super dark, no attack. Way closer there, so a lot is needed to get the track all the way there. And then I added some shimmer, and then adding some thickness back in. So I added all this top, but I didn't want the snare to sound too thin, so I added a bunch of thickness in, and then some blue channel compression. That's doing a lot of compression, like 5 dB. So, and then I added a transient shaper to add more attack to the snare, reduce the sustain. Then the CLA Epic to add some additional reverb to the snare. To have that bigger sound. So that's the kick and snare sound. The hat, I'm just adding some top, rolling off some lows. Toms, just adding a bit of low, a bit of high, nothing too crazy there. Overheads, I'm using the CLA Mix Hub and then use one of the overhead presets, but turn down the amount of high. It was a little too much high there. get some more attack out of that snare. The rooms took out a little low, added a little high. The compressor really hyped the high end, took out some low mids. So really about getting attack and top end was really key to this drum sound to get to cut through. There's a lot of top and attack in that drum sound. And arguably you could have probably a little more brightness at this point, but that is the drum sound. I do want to go to the mixer, and so we can look at the master bus processing. This is pretty typical for me. The virtual mix bus, using the SSL channel to add some top and bottom. Some stock EQ, added just a little bit of low mids and took out just a bit of the top there. Then I'm using the SSL compressor channel. This is one of the more compressed sounding Avenged Sevenfold tracks, so about 2 to 3 dB of master bus compression there. Using the limiter. Doing quite a bit of reduction there. Then I use Ozone 10, of course, to match the EQ and the width. It seems to be adding a lot of top there. So that's the master bus processing. Let's get to the bass guitar now. So first off, this is the processing on the bass. I have it split between a DI and an amp. That's pretty typical for me. And then by A7X2, I actually did decide to match the bass tone this time. It was unique sounding enough, and it filled out the low end in a very interesting way that I wanted to get very precise with this one in order to properly match the track. So here's what I call Hail to the Bass. It's just another tone match preset from Bias. There's not a lot of low end in that patch, so I do have the DI as well. And that's filling out the low end nicely. And so I'm using EQ, adding quite a bit at like 140 hertz. Then for the virtual mix rack, I am using the virtual channel, the preamp, to add some distortion to it. There's actually a lot of grit to this bass track. Added some top, added some low mids, and then added even more low end there. So just wasn't enough low end in that Bias FX2 patch, so I had to kind of make up for it. So that in the drums sounds like this. So that sounded really good. Let's get to the rhythm guitars now. So for the rhythm guitars, I actually quad tracked it. I think it was quad tracked on the record, so I want to emulate that with quad tracking here. And then I do have a Bias FX2 Hail to the King patch that I'm using on all the guitars. They're all going through that patch. It's important to note as well that the second rhythm guitars are a little bit lower in volume than the first and second one. I don't know how much of that it matters, but these are 4 separate takes of the guitars to get that sort of bigger, more filled out sound. So I do have my Hail to the King patch that I'm using for this. No drive pedal. There was enough guitars that I had enough gain, but I did turn the gain up quite a bit there. If I take these plugins off, it's a little too fizzy, not enough mid-range, so I use the CLA Mix Hub to add a little bit of EQ there, do some filtering. Then RIA-EQ is notching out some bad frequencies, removing the fizz or the really digital sounding stuff from Bias, and taking out some lows. So that's a guitar sound, pretty simple. I tracked it with my Avenged Sevenfold Sinister Gates Schecter, so about as close as I can get there to emulating the guitar sound. Just sounds way less present without the processing. So now let's get finally to the vocals. So this is my vocal production here. There's quite a few layers, but they're very subtle. They're very subtly mixed in there, I should say. So I've got leads, I've got a backup. The leads are just a center and a double up the middle.
I'm maintaining addiction.
Yeah, they're right up the middle on the track.
When there's no writing on the wall.
Then backgrounds. So that's like a high harmony. There's some doubles going on. And I think I have a lower octave double as well.
When there's no writing on the wall.
So a couple added layers there, but very subtle. It doesn't overpower the main vocal, just to add a little bit of thickness to it. And then for the processing on my vocal bus, I'm using EQ, taking out some of the like super low mids there, and adding just top overall. I think I probably threw that on at the end just to get it a little closer.
when there's no
Stock EQ, actually.
when there's no riding on. I see the light.
That's actually doing quite a bit of gain reduction there, but I do like the Reaper stock EQ. It's very transparent sounding. It doesn't add a lot of extra artifacts or distortion. Limiter, of course.
I see the lifeless dead.
That's doing quite a bit of reduction there. That was just to pin the vocal to one place and keep it there, is the idea. CLA Epic.
I see the.
A little bit of subtle delay and reverb going on there. Like if I take both ambience plugins off.
I see the lifeless dead.
As CLA always says, it's better to have a couple reverbs than just one, right? So I use CLA Epic. These are the settings on that. And then the Valhalla Supermassive, which is very subtle.
I see the lifeless dead.
To add like a little bit of a longer tail to the vocal. But these are very subtle in the mix and it's tough to pick out.
I see the lifeless devil start to crawl.
There tends to not be a lot of ambience on like M Shadow style of vocals. So I tried not to do that in this case. And then for the leads, I added some little extra processing. Virtual Mix Rack, which is my on recording day chain that I talk about. Virtual channel, virtual drive. Adding a bit of top with the stock EQ rolling off the little rumble there. Then using the distressor for some distortion, or not some distortion, but compression going in.
I see the lifeless devil start to crawl.
So that's some more gain reduction there. Then I'm using the CLA 76, so more compression there, so you can kind of get the idea of what I'm doing.
I see the lifeless devil.
20 dB of gain reduction, then de-essing to get rid of those harsh sibilants.
I see the lifeless devil start to crawl.
And the backgrounds have exactly the same processing. So to make sure there was a coherent sound between the vocals. So the whole vocal sounds like this. I'll remove the plugins actually.
I see the lifeless devil start to crawl. And I don't need no less.
So just adding brightness, compressing it, and getting it to sit well on the track is the key.
I see the lifeless devil start to crawl. And I don't need no less. After all, everybody's doing their time.
There we go. So that's the Hail to the King Avenged Sevenfold sound. Let me know how close did I get. I thought I got pretty close in this video. Anyways, if there's any other tracks or albums you'd like me to try and emulate or match, leave it in a comment down below. As always, you can find the multi-tracks for this video in the description if you want to mess around and do your own mix of the track. I'd love to hear it as well. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Here's the full playthrough of the track.